So the video you just saw from Kenyahara, I want to ask in here, how do you guys right now see the world? You know, please raise your hand if you think, can we get a little room light in here so I can see the audience? Who thinks humanity is going to end? In your lifetime. You get about 20 papers. It will be bad. Yes. Another 25. Perfect. We will be bored. 30. Carefully optimistic.
Carefully optimistic.
Good. Also 30. Things will be great. Pretty even distribution. Okay, one more.
Alright.
Great. Now about you yourself. Do you think you're going to be dead soon? Will be bad. I'll be bored. Carefully optimistic. Things will be great. So what you've noticed is that you think you're going to do much better than the world. And the interesting thing is that every single person in every culture around the world thinks exactly that. It's so widespread all around the world that there is a term for it, the optimism gap. Clearly something is fucked up, because if everybody thinks they're doing so much better than the world is, something does not quite line up. And I started to think about this in this space, the American Academy in Rome. They give you a fantastic space as a studio overlooking all of Rome. And this sound is sort of echoish. It's okay? Yeah, sounds good? Okay, excellent. So they give you a fantastic studio overlooking all of Rome. And of course, the best thing is that the food is fantastic. So there are unbelievable dinners where all 80 residents, these are archaeologists, designers, artists, filmmakers, show up every night, and it's a very salon-like atmosphere. And one evening I was placed next to a very smart lawyer. He was the husband of one of the invited artists. He worked at the European Court, and he told me what you're seeing right now in Poland, in Brazil, really means the end of modern democracy. And when I went to the studio back that night and looked it up, modern democracy, when did it start? It turns out that 200 years ago, there was a single democratic country in the world, the United States. 100 years later, there were 16. Another 100 years later, there were 84 countries that the United Nations say they are officially democratic. It's the first time in human history that more than half of humanity actually lives in a democratic system. So this very smart, highly educated lawyer who reads 5 quality newspapers in 3 languages every single day had no idea about the world he lives in. Completely misjudged it. Completely, utterly, demonstrably wrong. And I thought, what a juicy little strategy for a communication designer like myself. How did this happen? Well, mostly it happened because our media cycle became so mature. we used to actually read yearly almanacs that went to monthly magazines, daily, weekly, all the time on, and of course, constantly, every second, social media. And the shorter the news cycle, the shittier and more negative the news. In addition, my brain contains a shortcut for negativity, the amygdala, that allows negativity in, but doesn't do the same thing for positive news.
Yeah.
My brain can actually feel the negativity before the eyes have a chance to send it back. And that made an incredible amount of sense for our prehistoric ancestors, who of course needed the amygdala to keep them safe. But I myself lead a very, very safe life, and that life would be much better informed if I will also look at it from the long-term point of view. Because if I do actually look at it from the long term, I would say basically everything that I look at has gotten better. Now you might say, what do you mean? I might think of something completely different that is better than you do. And I would put it to you in this room and in the room next to us, that we actually have a very shared point of view of what we feel is better and what is worse. Most of us would rather be alive than dead. We'd rather have food than be hungry. We'd rather be smart than stupid. We would rather live in a democracy than in a dictatorship. We would rather be healthy than sick, and we would rather be at peace than at war. And the interesting thing is that these things can be measured. And the fantastic thing is that these things actually have been measured. We have fantastic data for 200 years that shows conclusively that all the things that I just mentioned have gotten demonstratively better. Now, of course, you might tell me, well, this is kind of statistics. It's cold. How does that actually affect my own life, my family? What do I have to do with this? Well, because I thought you might criticize this, I looked at my own family. These are my great-great-grandparents. These are Jacob and Johanna Sagmeister. And let's see another show of hands. Who has children in this audience? So quite a bit, about 20 people. I think those people who raised the hand, you would agree with me that possibly the single worst thing that could happen to you in your life would be the death of a child. There's nothing in your life that's worse than that. Well, this crazy, awful event happened to my great-great-grandparents not once or twice, but 6 times. 6 of their children died. And it was not that they were haunted by terrible luck. It was just basically how lives were lived then, because only just about half of all children reached adulthood. If you go to the next generation of Sagmeisters, these are my great-grandparents, they didn't do all that much better. 5 of their children died, and they died not as babies, but as 1, 2, 4, and 8-year-olds. That happened to them even though they actually belonged to the elite in Western Austria. And what made them part of the elite was they could read and write. And at that time, only 15% of all Austrians could read and write. And they owned a small antique store in the very western part of Austria, in Bregenz, where I grew up. And all the crap that they couldn't sell wound up in the attic of the house that I grew up in. And I took many of those unsold paintings and cut giant holes into them and filled these holes with things that sort of looked like minimal art, but really are data visualizations. So this is my grandmom. She was the first female member of my family who was allowed to vote, and she had to wait until she was 49 years old because voting laws, female voting laws, came into Austria only in 1919. And this little yellow circle that you see up there, that's how many women were allowed to vote 100 years ago. The big purple circle is how many women are allowed to vote now. In 185 of the 186 existing countries, women are allowed to vote. The only one that does not allow women to vote is a very small one. It is the Vatican. And that's kind of a crazy record for a country that was founded on a baby and her mother. In any case, female representation in government increased, and more women are working than ever before. But does that mean that everything is fantastic? I mean, of course not. Things, as you can see in this really shitty little AI animation, things are actually quite terrible still and need unbelievably to be improved. As little as 40 years ago, 50% of all Americans thought that women should go back into the kitchen. This has been now reduced to 20%, which still seems like an awful lot to me. And of course, we want that message to be out there, so we also made fashion and have labels inside that explain the whole thing, or in this case, a quote that really shows the unbelievable decrease of violence worldwide. If you lived 500 years ago anywhere in the world, your chances to being killed by the hand of another man were 25 times as higher than they are right now. We show on these glasses, by the size and number of sleeves, some positive developments in the world of the environment of hand-painted glasses by a Viennese company called Lobmeier. And of course, when I was young, when I first moved to the United States, I had all sorts of fears. You know, the population numbers were exploding, famines were inevitable, the deserts were advancing, garbage dumps were multiplying, and the oil was running out. If you looked at the Hudson then, it would have been completely, Hudson being the river next to New York, it would have been completely unthinkable to even imagine eating a fish out of the Hudson. And if you look at the New York State health site today, they still say, well, if you're a baby, you probably shouldn't eat Hudson fish, but for everybody else, it's already clear, and I'm sure in a couple of years, it will also be safe for babies. Now you might say, what the fuck are you talking about? The world is absolutely terrible. How about the war in Ukraine? Well, I actually did bring this presentation to Kiev. We had all sorts of exhibitions, not just there, but also in Lviv. And my friend Andrei there said, if you have real trouble in your life, your senses are just sharpened for some positive messages. This was a talk right there in Lviv, and I must have
They printed our book in Ukrainian. It's now in its third printing. It sold out immediately on a constant level. And I must have heard that message. Thank you for coming to Ukraine and bringing this message here literally hundreds of times. At the same time, of course, I believe that all that negative news that we hear on a constant basis, both on social and in traditional media, is absolutely necessary to kick us into action. But because it's all negative, so many of us just simply give up. There's a global survey from last year that shows that, done among 10,000 people, worldwide, people between 15 and 25 years old, that showed more than half, 53%, believe that the world will end during their lifetime. And this is the problem. Despair is not empowering, it is debilitating. All that doom and gloom makes people sit at home and do absolutely nothing about the actual problems that would need very, very urgently help. We do need positive and negative news in order to create social change. If you look at one of the most amazing changes from the last couple of decades, I would count the non-smoking campaigns. So many countries were able to cut their number of smokers into half, and that was created with negativity. Look at these unbelievable photos on the cigarette pack, but as well as this hope. Look at the healthy life you could possibly have. It was made with the carrot and the stick. And right now, both social and traditional media gives us plenty of the stick, and my goal is to deliver a little bit of the carrot. We've done exhibitions from the mountains of Tyrol to Ginza in Tokyo, to a Tadoando design space in Mexico, to a Zaha Hadid design space in Korea, where we also use these silly sort of figure dancers as a gigantic chart that shows the unbelievable, it's impossible, that shows the unbelievable. And we lower this a little bit. Hello, sound person, hello. So basically just shows the unbelievable change in longevity from an average of 24 years to an average of 83 years old. In Shanghai, we showed these embroideries made by unbelievably fantastic Chinese masters, almost photorealistic in nature. I mean, you can still see the typography in that hand embroidery. And of course, they show the unbelievable decrease of illiteracy and famines over the past century. 200 years ago, 90% of all Europeans lived in extreme poverty. It's a definition of the UN, what it means to be extremely poor and ruled over only by a tiny elite of people. The energy value of a typical meal in France was lower than the energy value of a typical meal now in the Republic of Congo, which is among the most malnutritioned countries in the world. And the United Nations predict that we will likely see the end of extreme poverty in our lifetime. This headline could have appeared every single day for the past 25 years, truthfully. So, both of these statements are absolutely true. The difference is completely created by depending on which time span you choose to look at it. Twitter or X will give you one point of view, history will give you another. Let's do this again. Who thinks humanity will end? Either nobody or I can see you. Let's see, it will be bad. Couple, less so 10, I think. How about we will be bored? Another 5. Who is carefully optimistic? Ooh. Things will be great? Ooh. Okay, so power of communication design. I can tell you that when I'm depressed, when I'm anxious, I'm just not a lot of help to my surroundings. Just for my friends and family, not very useful. If I'm doing well, I'm much more useful. So, for a more balanced view of the world, I urge you to scroll less through X or Instagram and consume fewer news sites and spend the time that you saved reading non-fiction books. You'll find yourself much less anxious and much better informed. Thanks a lot.